Oh my goodness, am I really here with the Dr. Eric Roman? Hi, Eric. How are you?
Hey, Victoria. It is so great to be here with you. And my, oh my, we got some exciting stuff to talk about, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Hey, guys, we thought we would take a minute just to bring you behind the scenes. We are vigorously planning for the 20th anniversary productivity workshop in September in Frisco, and Eric is going to take the stage as part of our clinical calibration course for young doctors. Eric, tell us about the course that you're doing here at our program.
Victoria, what we're talking about is how young doctors, and honestly, doctors at any stage of their development, can calibrate their life to their professional career. Calibrating your life and your career, because one of the challenges I've had the joy over my journey. By the way, Victoria, I don't know that a lot of people know, I actually attended the PDA workshop before I started practicing dentistry. Like, I was still in residency at the time. And so my entire life has been productive, right?
I remember you couldn't even grow a beard back then.
Couldn't even grow it. No, I might've had like 2 little blonde facial hairs. How times have changed, right? And so, it had such a massive impact on me throughout my career in PDA. So what a really cool fitting way to hopefully channel some of that incredible career opportunity to the audience and the attendees. One of the things that I found in coaching and hiring well more than triple digits of associates and teaching clinical directors, we've got a really hard space inside of our profession right now with the plight of the employed dentist, the dental associate. And we have extraordinarily high turnover. We have ridiculously poor data. And what that really means is that our young doctors aren't getting what they wanted out of their career. And the second thing that I discovered is that financial success does not translate into people getting what they want out of their lives. And if we can't connect our financial success and our performance in doing good while we're doing good in our practices to getting what we want out of our incredible lives, my Victoria, like, why are we doing this in the first place? So I'm going to give all the attendees some really tactical strategies to be able to take back and put into their lives ASAP so that they're going to get what they want out of their dental career.
Oh man, I love that so much. Well, thank you so much for being a part of it. In September, this whole program, the first of its kind in the nation, because it's coming from PDA and we've never done this before, but it is a program specific to associate doctors. So if you're an owner and you're contemplating hiring an associate, or you've just hired an associate, your associate is stuck in their productivity at 200, 300, 400 an hour, something like 3,000 a day. We can boost that. We can accelerate that and quickly get your associates up to speed where they're producing like an owner. But more importantly, they've got life balance and they're grounded in their happiness in their career. Dr. David Port talks about that a lot, his research study and his doctorate degree, the value creation for doctors. And it really is about values alignment between the work I love and the life I'm building. And so, Eric, there is no one better in our industry, whether you're young or young at heart, that couldn't benefit from your one life system and making sure that your life path is aligned with your career path. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Victoria. I'm excited to see you and the team in September and can't wait to see who else is going to be joining us there. It's going to be an event that you don't want to miss. So here's your chance. Sign your butt up and get out there. We'll see you in Texas.
Doctor, are you living the dream or just dreaming of living? It is my honor to announce the PDA 20th Anniversary Special Conference this September 12th to the 14th in Frisco, Texas, the nation's leading course on dental practice growth. If you feel isolated as a leader who is frustrated that your schedule is unproductive, maybe your team is disjointed, or your systems are inefficient, this is the conference for you. The PDA 20th Anniversary Conference has all new features, including keynote speaker Emmitt Smith, who is a Pro Football Hall of Fame running back and entrepreneur. You can choose your own educational track to customize your learning experience. Go to www.productivedentist.com and click the pop-up, or select Productive Dentist Academy Conference under the Dental CE and Events tab. That's www.productivedentist.com. Seating is limited. Register today, and we look forward to helping you make your dreams become reality.
Truth be told, we look up to people that have a lot of money. We envy that.
Welcome to the Everyday Practices Podcast. I'm Regan Robertson, and my co-host, Dr. Chad Johnson, and I are on a mission to share the stories of everyday dentists who generate extraordinary results using practical, proven methods you can take right into your own dental practice. If you're ready to elevate patient care and produce results that are anything but ordinary, buckle up and listen in. Welcome to Everyday Practices Dental Podcast. I am your host, Regan Robertson, here with the delectable, the delightful Dr. Chad Johnson. Hi, Chad. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I hope all you doctors out there in radio land are having a fantabulous Friday or whatever day of the week it is.
Today is your podcast trifecta because we have our frequently flying returning guest, Dr. Maggie Augustyn, who has brought us a very selfishly, personally interesting topic that I think will be very on point for many of our dentist listeners. Hi, Maggie. Good morning.
Oh, my favorite part of the day is just about to begin.
Yay.
Yay.
So I happen to be sporting with me my 10th anniversary. You can't, if you're watching on video, you can see this is beautiful celestial watch that our CEO procured for me. So if you're at PDA for 10 years, you get a signature piece. And I find it to be something that's very meaningful for me. I always wanted to be at an organization where I could make an impact over a long span of time. So early in my career, I had a lot of colleagues who hopped jobs every couple of years. And I felt very old fashioned. I thought, can't I just be at one company and achieve great things and have that be a happy life? And it seemed very in contrast. So this particular piece means a lot to me. And Maggie, you just went to London and had some epiphanies that you wanted to bring to the table today. And I think that now is the perfect time to do that.
Look at you pointing to your watch. So I found myself in it, and it wasn't intended, though I wanted to end up there. There's a street in London. And I spend most of my time in London walking around, just mesmerized. I love people watching. I love the architecture. I love the feeling. I love the weather. Even though it was raining on and off, just the idea of taking an umbrella with you is so romantic. But I found myself in a place called Bond Street, which is this narrow road, a little bit hidden almost. And as you walk in there, you just start to see these stores one by one. Tiffany's, Harry Winston's, Louis Vuitton, Chanel, everything that you can think of. And I'm walking, similar to, there's places in Las Vegas like that. There's places in New York like that. There's places in LA like that. There's Michigan Avenue in Chicago. And so I found myself walking through that. And one of the bucket list items that I had, even though this trip was a bucket list item, also was the first biggest trip that my family and I took together, was to spend a little bit of luxury money on Bond Street and buy myself something nice. And as I kept walking store to store, I would see like this one example that I give, and this will end up being an article that will be published in my column in Dentistry Today. But I watch a mom, probably a little bit younger than me, of a daughter that was about my daughter's age, which was about 14, and they're picking out a new Chanel bag. And they've got lots of different bags around them. And I'm thinking, wow, what a life it must be that you've got this 14-year-old choosing between two different Chanel bag colors when it's taking me an entire lifetime to maybe possibly get to a point where I have saved enough money where I could buy my own, I don't know, 5, 6, 7,000 pound bag, right? And so I'm really moved by that. And then I start to wonder as I think about spending my own money, why am I doing this? Why am I choosing to spend so much money on something? What is it that I'm going to get back from that? Because the other times that I've spent significant amount of money, what you start to notice if you really pay attention is that the high, and it's a high, right? When you buy that, when you take it home, when you start to use it and wear it, that high doesn't last. And then I started to think, is the more money you spend, is the high higher? If you save for longer, is the high higher? Does it last longer? And what I ended up coming up with as I started to think about all of that is the question of, when we buy these things for ourselves, when we save for them, or maybe when we don't, do we do this so that we feel special? Or do we do this because we want other people to think that we are special? And that was a huge awakening for me. Enough so that I walked away from Bond Street without buying anything, but instead I got this experience of making a decision not to,
Yes.
which I did not expect to make. And in truth, I think it's been a higher that's lasted longer than had I actually put that Chanel bag on my credit card. And so, in understanding how big, the question for me was, do we realize that when we do that, it's not about us being special, it's about wanting to appear special to other people. And I wanted to bring that front and center to talk about, to see whether or not other people feel the same way. And even what you talked about with the watch. My father-in-law got a watch for 30 years. He got a Rolex watch for 30 years being with a company. When someone's 15 years with Happy Tooth, we give them something from Louis Vuitton. I mean, and that goes, those things are very special. But why do we do this? Why do we buy luxury goods? What is so special about it? So I really would like to hear your thoughts on this and see where you're coming from. What do guys spend their money on, Chad? Like, what do you guys want other than cars?
Cars, depending on the person, cars, guns.
Guns.
I mean, stuff like even knives, boats, and it would depend on the guy, right? So some guys are into none of that. It could honestly be a tractor, like a riding lawnmower, stuff like that. So, but I think part of
Okay,
the
Midwestern.
idea, totally. But I think some of the idea would be as old as time, that you want something special. And so the luxury is one aspect of specialness, that even as the Hebrews are leaving the wilderness and they cross the Jordan River, and God speaks to them and says, set up on the other side of the river a pile of rocks as a remembrance that this happened. And I want you to pick rocks out of the bottom of the river. So that way, when people walk by, they go, these rocks don't look like they belong here. What is the story here? And that there's something special and historic about it. And those rocks didn't cost those Hebrews anything, but it was definitely special. And the specialness is what mattered. And these days, if someone were to put a price tag on those rocks, like if they found those rocks, they would be priceless. But not because the stones were any different than the rock that came from the earth a half a mile up the road. But they were. I mean, the history behind it. So, the 15 years, the 20 years of history is what it commemorates. And to me, that's what's the most important significance of it. And that's just a thought off the fly. Regan, what are your thoughts?
I have many thoughts. I like the Rolex reference. So I believe, Maggie, I've done some statistical searches. which are really interesting because you're getting into the science of it and you're asking, what really is driving us. And according to Luxury Institute, 57% of consumers buy these luxury items to demonstrate success to others, which is fairly high since you're above that 50 mark. And 49% believe that these items make them feel more confident. I agree with you. There is I think it's a triangle of self-perception and confidence. And that's that helps you show up to the world better. And in this article, which everyone needs to be reading, you talk about the feeling you have of when you wear your symbol, the pieces that symbolize milestones for you and the brand names associated with that. So there's the self-perception, there's the status that you're displaying to others. So as you are walking around, that's definitely showcased. And then the neurological effects, which is, to me, I would like to spend more time digging into deeply. And how long does that dopamine hit last? And if it's more expensive, does it go longer? That is very intriguing to me that I don't have an answer to. On top of that, I don't know if both of you, have you heard of quiet luxury or stealth wealth? That is the new wave. High millionaires to billionaires have all gone into the path of displaying their wealth in very nonchalant ways. So what was once considered the Harry Winston diamonds and the showpieces that everyone can recognize is now no longer the best way to demonstrate your wealth. So they're showing that they're so above and beyond that they are doing quiet symbols of wealth to each other.
For example, I mean, I saw online basement mansions, so like under the mansions of wealthy homes that they're actually digging out third and fourth and fifth subterranean levels.
Yes.
And then,
that's a great example of it.
Yeah. So there's out in the Reconstruction period after the Civil War, a lot of the South, if you ended up still having money left over, you certainly didn't want to flaunt it because everyone around you didn't have it. And so the people who were flaunting their wealth were liars, and the people who actually had wealth would pretend to be poor for their life. Well,
really?
Well, can you imagine if it's just like, hey, that house over there, those people used to have money. They used to be plantation owners. But then, 3 doors down, if it's like, oh, those poor people, they used to have wealth and now they don't. But it's like, nuh-uh, in secret, they've got it hidden in a basement, or in a safe, or hidden offshores or something like that. But so they didn't want to. But if it was found out that they had wealth, guess who's the target? I mean, you have a whole state of decimated post Civil War, so postbellum poverty, and the potential is you have a walker by that is just like, I've got a gun. They've got wealth in there. Let's take it.
Oh, of course. That makes sense.
Yeah,
right.
So
right. So you want to kind of protect yourself. And yes, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yes.
In this discussion, the watch feature, I kicked it off because as I was thinking about it, I'm also 45. So it's been a milestone year for me. I love my watch very much. I went to Charleston with my girlfriends. We were having a girls' trip and we were shopping, and I found a Rolex that was just made for my hand. It was perfect. It had the pink, I think it's the pink oyster. I can't remember what it's called. Pink face dial, which I loved even more. And it turns out that particular one was spoken for, but they took my cell phone number down. And sure enough, I think it was like a week later, I received a text message. We have procured a similar one and, would be happy to fit you for it. And it was like $5,000, which I thought for a Rolex, that's a steal. That's great. Right.
Right.
This must have been a while ago, because I don't know that they sell for $5,000 anymore.
Right. It was no, it wasn't that long ago. But anyway, my point to it was, even at $5,000, because you're totally correct, Maggie, even at that, I had to stop and ask myself, what was this really for?
Mm-hmm.
And it took me on a mental journey that was much longer than I thought it was going to be. It was not fleeting. It turned into something that gave me deep reflection. And I realized, I have 2 children that will be going to college. I have a home that I cannot wait to fully pay off. I have goals that on the outside don't look very maybe sexy. A paid off house is a paid off house. So it doesn't display my success to other people, but it would feel absolutely incredible inside. So then I started thinking, why do I want this watch? What does it mean for me? And if I get this watch, what other goals that I may have, will it delay or will it delay?
Mm-hmm.
And is it
Yeah.
worth that?
My favorite part about what you're saying is that, truth be told, we look up to people that have a lot of money. We envy that. We're designed that way. To imagine yourself in a scenario where you take your young daughter, and buy her this watch, and you've already had 3 of them, is something that whether we admit it or not, we kind of aspire to a certain extent.
Because she got a B+ on a test.
But right, because and if she would have gotten an A, I don't know what other watch she would have gotten, right?
Right.
But I think that the truth is that when you're human and you develop in human development, the experience that Regan just went through, that she said lasted longer than she would have expected, and the gymnastics that your head and your mind is playing on you as you're considering the multifacets of a decision like that, I think that develops you further in your journey as a human than going to purchase that watch. And I would give up the purchase of that watch every time if it meant that I could develop more self-worth and understanding and self-compassion, whatever it is, in these gymnastics, however uncomfortable they are. I think in the end of it, you end up coming further along than had you actually had the money to buy yourself and your daughter matching watches.
Yes. Oh, you nailed it. Yes. Yes. And going back to the point of where the world is centered on wealth, because wealth equals resources and wealth equals freedom and options. And you have a whole lot of flexibility when you are, financially independent, and you can carry yourself that way. The symbolism, though, in our brains is so powerful. And I do think about that from a wealth standpoint of passing down to children. So I have, for example, I have 2 pieces from I guess it would be my great grandma Annie that I obviously never got to meet. I have a quilt that she made, and I have a brooch. And the brooch, I wouldn't say is anything spectacular. It's silver. It's, I think, black onyx. And there is the only photograph that I know of her. She has that on, and I feel extremely special having this momentum because it carries through the generations. Even though I never got to meet her, I know her story and how brave she was, being part of the settlers here. And I think that's incredible. Wow. So when I think about special pieces, now we get into what I would consider the real gymnastics. I have also a roll of silver quarters from my grandpa Joe, who I also never got to meet. And he was a very successful entrepreneur. He owned a car dealership, and he had all different types of businesses. That was left to me, was a roll of silver quarters. And I have that in my jewelry box. And I think about it often. And it's just a roll of quarters. It's just that, right? It's a roll of silver quarters, but it's what it symbolizes to me. And it was written on it, on the outside of the package, Steve Hamel's first daughter. So it was like,
oh, wow.
It was for me specifically, even though having never met me. And,
Right.
And that to me is very powerful. So I remind myself often what I'm doing this for. It's not just for me, and it's not just for my children. It's for my children's children and their children. Mm-hmm. And that helped me also shift out of it. So getting back to the point, the Rolex, pre-loved Rolex, right? Not that that's bad. That's not bad in and of itself either. It just made me think about what I'm doing this for, why I'm doing this. I have a very nice timepiece right now. It's nothing to cry at. It's very, very nice. That could be the piece. That could be special. It's not necessarily the value or even the brand, but it's the meaning that's behind it. And
so do you think when you that has a longer lasting dopamine surge?
It's like a different level of dopamine surge. It's not sexy is my word. It's not the sex. Lamborghinis make tractors, by the way. They make some impressive looking tractors. So yeah, Lamborghinis.
Well, because the history of Lamborghini.
No, are they farmers?
Yes.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So we'll go into that at another time, and you'll have to ask ask your hubby about those details. So I won't steal his thunder.
My son and husband just toured the Lamborghini factory in Bologna, Italy.
Yes.
So that was that was one of their big trips. So in other words, it might not be a Lamborghini and that outward flashy sexiness and the amount of quality that represents as well. But the meaning that you tie to it, I think that definitely gives you that sustainable, maybe it's contentment or satisfaction, Maggie. You're really, really making me want to dig into this and understand the neurological terms to use, because when I think of a dopamine hit that is fleeting, that is something that appeals. And maybe that's our indicator too, that this is not for us. Mm-hmm. And this is perhaps for someone else to see on us.
There's this idea, and I don't know how well that plays into the whole thing about rich guilt. Another neurological issue here, a person that comes into money quickly and is capable of spending it on luxury goods easily has a really hard time with that. There's a sense of guilt that comes along with coming into money quickly. And so that's just another one of those pieces of the gymnastics. Because, essentially, my husband and I came from not much, right? Our ability, nobody before us was able to spend money on a Rolex, right? So then when we go through these gymnastics, or shouldn't I, how much does guilt play a role in that? And then on the other side of the token, if you buy the Rolex, is that in the celebration of how far you've come compared to, let's say, your grandfather, or well, yes. At least in my case, right? That was yes. a farmer. So it's who did not have a Lamborghini tractor. But there's just so many different things that go into what moves us to spend our money on things that are truly unnecessary. And we come back to the same question of want versus need, and the manipulation that the word need plays on your mind, and whether or not you fall into that.
Right.
I do not use the word need. I use want and desire. And a mindset shift is powerful in this. So how we approach wealth. I love so much what you said. The Rolex could be passed down, and it's that symbol of, I have helped our legacy. I have come farther. I have moved us forward, I guess. And I think that is a very powerful piece to that. So whether it is a personal item or it's something greater, like selling, paying off your home, I think how you shift and think about where you're putting your resources and what it means to you, just slowing down and giving yourself a little space. So on Bond Street, I know myself, I would be so impulsively tempted. And I know you love art so much, Maggie, that I would bet the farm and a Lamborghini tractor that you didn't run into a few things on Bond Street and think, I must come home with this. I bet it would blow me away.
There's just so many interesting things. Yes, there was old jewelry. There were crowns that were worn by princesses. There were vests, custom-made vests that were made by the same people that made the vests for King Charles. Custom-made shoes. There was so much that was foreign on there. But when you think about bringing that home, again, these are stock images from TJ Maxx or Marshalls, whatever it is, right? Would my life be different?
I
think your life would be different if you came home with a tiara and wore it. Yes.
I would wear that tiara every time I was on this podcast.
Yes.
Stop calling me doctor. I shall be called queen.
HRH, doctor. I love that. I am Chad. I'm trying to think of the Mustang was one element for you,
Yes.
or a home in Hawaii would be
Yes.
one thing for you that I would
Yes.
see
Monumental
as,
things. Sure.
yes, your pinnacles of success. And I think you like Maggie are also very adept at creating a little bit of space. So that space between when we recognize and respond is so powerful. And that's been my journey for several years and will continue in perpetuity. Is the Zen nature exists for me in that space to reflect before I pull the trigger.
Mhm.
And I know you got to do that with with both, with the Mustang, and you eventually did get the Mustang.
I feel like dentists are fantastic examples typically of delayed gratification. And we spend a good, well, I've heard that's changing, but historically, like it's not like you're rich the day you graduate.
Sure.
And you have in mind what your potential could be, that someday the dentists that you look up to, you could be that person. And as such, some of the materialistic, and there sometimes it's just that, and we can call it that, but at the same time, there's stuff that we want, or we want for our families, for our kids, for our parents, maybe even for ourselves. And we don't get that right away. uh, for me, the Mustang was an example where I had a deal with my wife that if our cars were paid off and I could pay for it in cash, that I could get one. And you know what? It's not the fanciest of cars, but for me, um, it was contrarian, uh, tongue in cheek. Like, this is awesome for me. Like, so if someone pulled up and said, I'm driving a Lamborghini, not a tractor,
Tractor.
but like a regular Lamborghini, I'd be like, I'm happy for you. I'd rather have the Mustang. And it's a sensible splurge. It's a blue collar man's favorite car. And I liked that. But yeah, it took me, I mean, here I am. I'm 20 years in, and at some point I wanted a fun car, but I waited 19-ish years, to get that. And then it made it more worth it when I have it. And I tell people, like, I feel like there's two kinds of people: those that say a car just gets you a place, and I don't think they're wrong, and that's probably a majority of people. I find myself still a year now out, 13 months out from getting it, still enjoying and looking back at it and having fun, reveling in the idea of my vehicle. And I'm, I don't think it's wrong either way. So sometimes they pit that, like it's wrong to not appreciate your car. And then other people like, it's wrong to appreciate your car. And it's just like, no, no, no. I just think there's two kinds of people, but I'm the kind of person that my mind gets turned on by the idea of enjoying that car and coming around a 90-degree turn, and off a 90-degree stop and
At 90 miles an hour.
No, not in first gear, but maybe in second gear, hypothetically, officer. But like going through a roundabout now with all those coming about in second gear, and like just, oh man, looking in the rearview mirror and I'm like 50 to 100 yards ahead out of the roundabout as someone else. That's just, oh, it's just delightful. So yes, I don't have the same, like the watch and the purse to me, I can appreciate, but it's not quite the same for me. But I can translate it into other stuff. I see plenty of dentists on Facebook talking about watches, and I'm just like, I think there's probably some guys that don't say much about it like me, that are just like, I don't get it. I mean, to each their own, but I don't get it. But you know what? If the watch is your thing, where like you're just like, no, that, here's what I wanted to wrap up, like my wrap up thought was, so if you have something that you're aiming for, and perhaps my next big awesome would be like a house in Maui, that would be, like that would be really cool. But it, like, if that is what pushes me to keep going when things are hard at times. And even like, it's just a dumb, you'd think it'd be like, well, don't you want to help people? Isn't that enough? And it's just like, it should be. But there are times when it's just really sucky and you just go, you know what? I'm going to push one day at a time. And maybe someday I'll have that and I'll look back and it'll be worth it. Why? Because the little dopamine hits historically have reminded your mind that at some point it becomes worth it. And so the future dopamine hit, like the promise of future self dopamine hit, makes you go, it'll be worth it then too.
That's a really beautiful bow at the end of that. Is turning this, yes, of course. Take a bow.
Yes.
I'll lend you my tiara.
I'd wear it, it.
He would. Of course he would.
Attaching. So it's not just about going in to purchase that watch. Maybe it's not even about the milestone, 45th, 50th birthday. Maybe now we are attaching it to having built our resilience and using that as a symbol that would remind us of the struggle.
Yes. Oh,
that's what you're saying,
Maggie.
right? Like
yes, I think that is what Chad's saying.
Every time you have a really crappy day at work, you're like, I'm going to get through this because I promised myself that the more times I'm going to get through this, I'm going to get closer to the house in Maui.
And I've proven in the past that I can get through it, and I'm going to do it again. I think there's a pinnacle of success too, and it would be like King Solomon, the Koheleth character in Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament. I'll reference this again. That gets to the point where he's so super rich, the likes of which we won't ever see, that he says, man, under the sun, meaning, except for the eternal perspective, like on this earth, it's meaningless. That's how he starts out, meaningless. This is just meaningless. And I recently watched Mike Tyson on a YouTube video or something like that, where he was just like, these belts mean nothing to me now. He's like, when I was 20, I wanted all these belts. I wanted to, to be the best. And he's like, what is he, 65-ish now, 60? And he's like, these don't mean a thing to me. And he had a whole table full of them that he was showing the interviewer. And I thought it was fascinating. Not that that's the truth, because I believe it. I believe that's the truth, that he would say it. So that's when you've really come to a point of maturity. There might come a point where we just go, like, let's say it's your last week of life and you go, this watch in the eternal perspective doesn't mean anything. Now, it meant something to me and it still means something to me, but like in the grandest of schemes, like Mike Tyson, this doesn't mean anything. I thought it did. And so like the terminus, I suppose, that of us talking about what we're talking about is there might come a point where I just go, that Mustang got my dopamine hit and it pushed me to the next thing. And is there value to that? Yes. But then again, in an eternal perspective, like, was there value to it? Maybe the actual value of it was to teach you that it was worthless. I mean, like, so the bigger the prize, and then afterwards, the bigger the letdown, that you just go, the second grade trophy that you won for hitting 2 home runs that year, like, so what? It's cool at the time, but then again, like, these are really hard questions now, because we answered some of the ones where it's just like, okay, that's what those things are for. But is there even a last terminal one where it's just like, this is meaningless? And there's a value in that.
I had never considered that coming to the realization that these are worthless could be the point. Yeah. That is mind blowing to me. But I will tell you, after my cancer surgery, I was home alone and I was a mess. And I remember laying on the floor crying, looking around my house, looking at my shoes. And I have a lot of shoes and thinking, this does not mean anything.
No.
But I believed it. I lived it. But again, that feeling didn't last either.
No.
Because I still have more shoes.
Yep. Listen, after you get to the top of Half Dome in Yosemite, if you're going back down and you tell the people that are going to the top, hey, it's not worth going up to the top.
Yeah.
They're still ascending. they need to see it for themselves, and they'll enjoy the view. And then on the way down go, man, my legs really hurt. And so this is just part of the cycle of life is, but I think there is value to going, when I got down to the bottom 9th mile on the return of Half Dome, and I was like, I hope to never do this again. Now, my human spirit, 10 years later, 8 years later, something like that, I'm just like, maybe I'd take Gabe, my son, up to the top. Maybe that would be fun. But someone coming back down from Half Dome top is going, Chad, it's not worth it. But on the way up that Half Dome rise, on the chains, you're like, nah, shut up, I'm going. So you almost have to experience it for yourself.
There is a podcast called Soul Boom, SOULBOOM. It's run by Rainn Wilson. And he, Dwight on The Office. Yes. I love Rainn Wilson. He also has a TV show. I think it's called I don't know if it's The Pursuit of Happiness. He visits happy countries. It's a very deep show. And I wish I could remember the guest. In fact, maybe I'll put it in the show notes so people can reference this. There's a gentleman on there and says, it's really a sad state of affairs that our whole globe has whittled down value to one thing, and it's money only. Where did we lose that value on love and community and these other aspects? How do we place value on that when all we have done is whittled it down to money? And I heard that little sound bite, and I sat with myself and really thought about ancestral, generational, your genetics as you pass it down. And you've heard of probably generational traumas. And we know from a basic scientific level, cells transfer. They transfer information. Water carries energy. So what could I leave my children if it wasn't money? And it wasn't.
Yeah.
Thank you. And it wasn't, it was more than that. What could it mean? And I remember in that meditation session I had, what I whittled it down to was, if I left one thing, because you're right, Maggie, none of this matters. It's great that I get to help doctors and teams. I'm very jazzed by that. And I know that the ripple effect is powerful, but if none of this means anything, the one thing I could leave behind that I thought of was, I'd love to show my children what a healthy, loving, functional relationship looks like if I gave them only one thing. And that comes down to what I value and my inner value. And Anissa Holmes, you reference in your article, and she says, ego is not your amigo.
Yeah.
And I am going to take that with me for the next week, Maggie. I can't wait to reflect and think about this more. When our ego gets in the way and starts driving, that's when we start making, I think, short burst dopamine hits that maybe don't sustain us in the long run. So this is what you've got me thinking about, Maggie. Thank you.
Very cool.
I think we need to have another podcast on ego alone. That's just another really fascinating component of what makes us multidimensional humans and
with
what
Ryan
we pass.
Holiday.
Let's get Ryan Holiday on. He's got nothing to do.
Yeah.
Right.
What if we just all message him and see if he responds to any one of us?
We'll do it.
Ego is the enemy, right?
I promise all the listeners right now to at least by the end of the day, reach out to him to get on our podcast. You're welcome. Now we'll see if I'm a loser and a nobody and he doesn't care about me. And if so, then he's the jerk and I'm the victim. No, I'm just playing around with peeps. But yeah. Thanks everyone for being great listeners. Maggie, thank you, number one, for sharing the article, because for posterity's sake, that will go beyond this podcast and the reach of that. And that's pretty cool. And for coming on here and discussing it as well. Hopefully in the dialogue workshop, in the workshop of being able to dialogue with people sitting around in the same sandbox and pounding out ideas, it makes us all better people. And hopefully the listeners got the benefit from that as well.
Amazing.
Friendly reminder before we sign off, if you've enjoyed Dr. Maggie Augustyn today, you can see her live and in action at PDA's 20th anniversary conference happening September 12th to the 14th in Frisco, Texas. We are nearing sold out, however. So head over to productivedentist.com today and you can secure your seats.
Reminder to the Frisco, if you're like, why would I go to Frisco, Texas? It's the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So super major airport right nearby. It just has the best restaurants there. So
Yeah, I figured that barbecue reference was coming at some point.
That's right. Everyone, have a great day. Until the next episode. Take care.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Everyday Practices Podcast. Chad and I are here every week thanks to our community of listeners just like you, and we'd love your help. It would mean the world if you can help spread the word by sharing this episode with a fellow dentist and leave us a review on iTunes or Spotify. Do you have an extraordinary story you'd like to share or feedback on how we can make this podcast even more awesome? Drop us an email at podcast@productivedentist.com. And don't forget to check out our other podcasts from Productive Dentist Academy at productivedentist.com/podcasts. See you next week.